Right-wing extremists pose a greater threat to our national security than ISIS. This is not my personal opinion. This is a fact known by federal law enforcement. Counter-protesters are not the problem. They're a byproduct of the problem, and I'm grateful to the thousands of Portland residents who've engaged in peaceful protest in opposition to this administration, in opposition to the global rise of fascism, and in opposition to homegrown racism and bigotry. I'm very concerned about the false equivalencies being made between right-wing extremists and left-wing counter-protesters, both inside and outside of this building. There's a tendency to paint all counter-protesters with the same brush based on the worst actors, when people committing violence and vandalism are a tiny minority of the overall resistance playing out on our streets. And when that behavior is often provoked by the police bureau's crowd control tactics. Counter-protesters occupy a broad spectrum of the left, from moderates to radicals, and the vast majority of them are peaceful. Yet I often hear them all characterized as lawless anarchists. I would expect a more nuanced understanding of left-wing protesters than the antiquated caricatures of the bomb-throwing anarchist. Anarchism at its heart is a political philosophy based on mutual aid and direct democracy, autonomous individuals working together for the greater good in a non-hierarchical system. It is not an inherently violent belief system, and in fact has a strong tradition of nonviolence and pacifism. I'll take anarchists over fascists any day. Thank you. Over the past 27 years, since I started attending rallies, marches, and protests, I have personally witnessed police brutality and excessive use of force. I have friends who have been victims of it and have sued the city and won settlements. I was part of a group of activists being illegally surveilled by the Portland police in the 1990s. I'm not taking a stroll down memory lane for fun or street cred. I'm painting a picture of my perspective as an activist, observer, and now policymaker. We have a policing problem when it comes to protests, but it's not just the protesters. We have each taken an oath to uphold the constitutions of the United States, the state of Oregon, and the city of Portland charter. We have a moral and legal obligation to defend the constitutional rights of everyone, regardless of whether we agree with their politics, speech, tactics, or strategies. We also have a moral and legal obligation to ensure the public safety. There is a balance to be struck here. Unfortunately, I do not believe this ordinance achieves it. I look forward to continued communication and collaboration with advocates and activists, my colleagues, and the Portland Police Bureau on how to best achieve our obligations and ensure public safety. But with all due respect to the mayor and the police chief, I vote no.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who took time to testify during last week's hearing, including Representative Janelle Bynum, Andrew Hohen of Portland Business Alliance, Steve Falstick of Travel Portland, Kimberly McCullough from ACLU Oregon, Beth Wooten of the Portland National Lawyers Guild, Commissioner-elect Joanne Hardesty, and many others. Thank you, Chief Outlaw, for listening to all the testimony in person and for being here today to hear our comments in person. Thank you to my staff for helping with this response to the Mayor's proposal, especially Cynthia Castro and Tim Crail. And thank you, Mayor Wheeler, for listening to feedback and amending the ordinance to make it much improved from the original proposal. Even so, I cannot support this ordinance. Oregon and the Pacific Northwest have been strongholds of white supremacy for over 2 centuries. The city of Portland has a long and shameful history of discrimination, hate crimes, and racism. This is unacceptable and must end. White supremacists are not welcome in Portland, and the City Council should make that clear in every decision we make. Violence during demonstrations is a community issue that has threatened public safety, resources, our economy, and our reputation as a safe and welcoming city. This is a community issue that requires community engagement and buy-in to address. From its very beginning as a state, Oregon has normalized hate speech and emboldened individuals to act on their hostility towards marginalized communities. Now, vitriolic rhetoric at the national level is further inciting violence all over our country. We can point to many examples, such as the tragedies that took place in Pittsburgh and Kentucky last month, in Charlottesville last year, and in the Max incident that occurred right here in 2017. It is all too familiar as we remember the murder of Ethiopian immigrant Mulugata Sarab 30 years ago. Thank you to the Urban League of Portland for commemorating the anniversary with an inspiring conference yesterday. And thank you, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Daly, for joining me there. We must counter hatred and divisiveness with love and unity. With a policy that proposes to tell people how, when, and where they can protest, the community must be engaged and listened to in forming a proposal. This did not happen before the ordinance was proposed, and the ordinance should not be the starting point for these conversations. We need to convene discussions with stakeholders such as business owners, the Portland Police Bureau, and the ACLU to develop reasonable, specific mechanisms to reduce problems at protests. The ACLU has already signaled their desire to help, as has the Western State Center, the Council on American Islamic Relations of Oregon, and the Oregon Justice Resource Center. There are alternative solutions. We can support counter-demonstration, and we can support counter-demonstrations that draw attention away from white supremacists, rather than feeding into their quest for an audience and a fight. Lawyers will debate whether this ordinance is constitutional. Arguing about the restrictions in court when they may not even help much on the ground is not wise use of taxpayers' money. The regulations distract attention from the underlying problem. There have already been protests about the protest ordinance, and more may happen if it passes. We need unity and compassion in Portland right now, not more arguing amongst ourselves. This ordinance seeks to address the problem of violence at demonstrations by giving the mayor the authority to tell Portlanders and others what to do, with the Portland Police then charged with enforcing those rules, as well as existing laws on criminal and misdemeanor behaviors. The problem we are addressing today is not disparate treatment by Portland Police. The problem is that white supremacy has been woven into the fabric of our community for far too long, and we are faced again with the rising hate speech by white supremacists leading to violence and protests, at protests and in our community. That's where we need to focus our energy. As we grapple with the violence on our streets, the nation watches us. The proposed ordinance is not an accurate reflection of who we are as a city. Let us show our community and the nation that we are resilient, that when Portlanders come together, we are a force to be reckoned with, that violence will not be tolerated, and both perpetrators and instigators will be held accountable. To do this, we first need to do another thing that Portlanders do well: talk with each other and listen to each other. I'm confident Portlanders can help the council define better solutions than this. No.
Mayor and colleagues, after careful consideration, I cannot support this ordinance. But I want to begin this morning with where we agree. Everyone should be welcome in our public square. Hate, bigotry, and violence have no place in our community. And it's long overdue that we all link arms and say to the Proud Boys, Patriot Prayer, and those who would bring hate into our community, stay home. Protecting public safety is one of our basic obligations. Any limits on the rights of free speech and public assembly protected in our state and federal constitution are subject to heightened legal scrutiny. In general, government must establish that those limits are a last resort. There's been too much violence during recent protests, especially instigated by members of alt-right groups using Portland as a staging ground. These events have taken precious resources out of other neighborhoods, leaving East Portland and other areas without the services they, like all of us, help fund and deserve. They also have a consequence for our goals around community policing. My vote today is based on several factors. First, I have concerns about the constitutionality of the protest ordinance. At the very least, it sets us up for a costly and divisive legal battle. Second, I'm not convinced that we've done everything we can with the tools already at our disposal. That includes arresting people who violate our laws. Third, I am encouraged by the offers we have received from civil liberties and civil rights organizations to develop a new approach to address the alt-right violence in our streets. This is a close call for me. The mayor, as police commissioner, is entitled to a certain amount of deference, and I'm grateful to Mayor Wheeler for beginning this conversation. He's right to focus on solutions to the unacceptable violence on our streets and the rising tide of hate and intolerance of a local minority. And he has made real progress pursuing the police reform agenda on which he ran for office. At the same time, I cannot ignore the many community voices that have raised fair concerns with this approach and have offered to be part of a different solution. My vote is not a referendum on the job Chief Outlaw is doing. She has the hardest job in local government, and she deserves our respect and our support. Nor is it a commentary on the women and men in uniform who serve and protect our city. They too deserve our respect and support. Rather, it reflects my sincere ambivalence with this path forward and my belief that other alternatives will be more successful. I am grateful to the many community leaders who shared their perspective during this debate. I'm proud of the conversation that we've had among colleagues on this dais. Today, I vote no.
Your legacy, Saltzman.
Your lot, you know, rules, please.
I know the rules.
Yes. All right, take a recess.
The actionary, that's what conservatives do.
Listen, you guys are interrupting, you guys heard the rules when you got here. Do you not hear them? When you interrupt the council's discussion, that robs everybody else the opportunity to hear what's going on.
Silence.
So please don't do it. Excuse me.
Why your security guards are interrupting me?
They're interrupting you because
Yeah,
you're on your spot.
because my light keeps turning on and they're
Yeah, please turn it off. Thank you.
You guys can get duct tape where my thing can go on.
Well, I want to associate myself with many of the remarks my colleagues just made about the state of affairs in our country, in our city right now, and the predominance of alt-right and hate groups. But I come down to this very differently. First of all, I'm no lawyer. I'll leave the legal arguments to the lawyers to decide, but I look at it from a simple matter of how do we best protect Portlanders. And I think in many respects, we all fully respect everybody's right to protest and exercise their rights to free speech. But there's also a public safety factor, as Mayor Wheeler's proposed or ordinance does, and that is to provide the mayor the ability to say, do your protest, but do it a block away from each other. So you're not provoking, goading one another. And to the extent that that happens, the Patriot Prayer and Proud Boys, they're playing us like a fiddle. They know they can come down to Portland because they know they can provoke the response, and they know that they can ultimately, the police, to my mind, are often just caught in the middle. And they get provoked too. I mean, they're only human. If you assault somebody, throw something at them, they're going to respond like any human would. They're going to try to protect themselves. They're going to be angry. These are very fundamental, basic human emotions. But I think that, we have too much goading and we'll be played like a fiddle. And, I can't help but think that this week is the 80th anniversary of the Kristallnacht. The night Nazis played the German people like a fiddle, unleashed their fury on Jewish merchants and Jewish residents of their country. And these groups are doing that to us. And I think we need a strong step forward. I think Mayor Wheeler's proposed ordinance, may not be unconstitutional, may not be constitutional, but we need to try things. We need to try solutions. You can't just sit up here and
Period.
Celebrate the First Amendment and say, and at the same time express our concerns about the predominance of the alt-right and hate groups without trying to do something about it and protect Portlanders from getting into situations where they are going to be hurt, maimed, God forbid, even killed. And I see that the current path we're on provides no answers. This is a proposed answer. It's a modest step to protect Portlanders, and I thank Mayor Wheeler and Chief Outlaw for bringing this forward. And I'm pleased to vote on it.
So obviously, anybody here who can count knows that this is over, but there's a few things I'd like to say nonetheless. First of all, I'd like to start with this. The ordinance, the very first sentence of the ordinance was a reaffirmation of this council's commitment to First Amendment rights, to this council's commitment to the right to assembly and the right to speak one's mind, even if what is being said is considered reprehensible.